One of the things that the United States Congress is considering is whether or not to pass an amendment to the Civil Rights Act of 64 and add sexual preference along with all the other protected groups in America. To talk about that, I thought I'd talk to LGBT attorney Angela Giampolo. Ms. Giampolo, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Lars. Thanks for having me.
So, are you in favor of this, changing the Civil Rights Act?
Before we get started, you mentioned sexual preference. And I know a lot of people, especially if they're straight, don't mean to use that term, but I prefer Mexican food over Italian, but I don't prefer men over women. So I'm oriented in sexual orientation and gender identity.
Orientation, preference. All right,
yeah.
Fair enough. So are you in favor of adding what group to the civil rights protections of the 64 Act?
Sure. I mean, the LGBT community and the basis, if you will, to being added to a protected class, you know, like African American or women or seniors, disabled people, is whether or not that group that you're looking to add has experienced pervasive, historical, and long-term discrimination.
So in other words, white males, white heterosexual males and females need not apply.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, why not? Shouldn't discrimination of any form be against the law?
So pervasive, historical, and long-term. Last time I checked, white people were the slave owners, whether they were male or female. Last time I checked, women.
Actually, there were black slave owners as well. Actually, there were black slave owners as well, and there were also white slaves in America, about 30,000 of them.
Lars, let's not be offensive.
Well, I'm not being offensive. I'm saying there were black slave owners.
White men have not been pervasively discriminated against. Tim Cook was able, by staying closeted, to become the most powerful CEO of the most largest revenue-generating company in the world, Apple. All right, how many women CEOs do we have? I mean, let's be real. All right, so white people generally rule this country, and men rule the world. So let's not be facetious and talk about whether
I'm not being facetious. I'm saying when you say all slave owners were black, or white, that's simply not true. But let's move along.
The comment I'm talking about is whether or not men deserve that same protection, that all discrimination deserves to be put in the Civil Rights Act. Not every discrimination. So are men discriminated against at times?
Yes.
Absolutely. Does it deserve to be put into the Civil Rights Act to amend the Constitution? No.
Well, tell me how that's going to work then. Hold on, Ms. Giampolo.
The country is founded on protecting those who can't protect themselves.
Ms. Giampolo. Giampolo. How do you make that square up with the guarantee under the Constitution that all people will be given equal protection of the law when you say we're going to take some people and say, no, you don't get the protection of the law? That doesn't seem to square up with equal protection, does it?
So, Lars, I have had lawsuits where I've defended white men who've been discriminated against.
Yeah.
You have the law.
But
whether or not you're going to be a protected class, not everybody can be a protected class.
Why not?
Because we have everybody in the entire United States. So if we then just put everybody in the protected class would then become null and void.
Then we would all be legal. We'd all be equal, right? I mean,
so
for instance, let me knock through.
You're not a fan of affirmative action, I take it.
Well, I'm a fan of the marketplace working.
Are you a fan of affirmative action? Yes or no?
No, because I think that it ends up being a reverse form of discrimination. So,
oh my God, you need power in order to discriminate, Lars. You need power in order to discriminate. What am I going to do to you as a lesbian female? Now, let's say I don't have a leg. I'm a disabled, Inuit lesbian. How am I going to discriminate against you in this world? All
right. I think we're getting hung up on the semantics of this. I'm just concerned that you believe in equal protection, and apparently I've found out you don't. So what I want to know next, under LG... Let me tell you what the equal protection... I'm never going to get to this question. I just know it. But go ahead.
No, let me tell you what the equal protection argument is. With this whole marriage, in terms of employment discrimination, which is what you're talking about, that's up for debate, and we're going to keep doing that too early. But in terms of the marriage decision that came down June 26th, when you have 1,138 state and federal rights tied to an institution in the United States, You are no longer allowed to tell one group of people that they're not entitled to said rights.
Oh, but you can. You can, because every state in America still has particular marriage laws that still do discriminate against some people. Cousins can't get married in half the states; they can in the other. People of a certain age are told you can't get married, and in other states they can.
And they should sue.
They should sue.
Bring it up.
So that the lowest marriage...
That issue has never been before this.
Angela, I really want to get to the issue that I really wanted to get to with this. When you add this group, how are you going to define this group? Because right now it's LGBT. Sometimes they add other initials to that. But let's just start with that. So anybody who's lesbian, bisexual, right, gay, or transgender. So that means, and by transgender, I'm hearing new definitions of cisgendered and a lot of other things on that T. How are you even going to define who's in that class and who's not?
What difference does it make?
Well, it makes this difference.
Why would someone who's
I was going to answer your question, so you'll know how to answer my question. When Rachel Dolezal claimed to be a black woman, do you think she was accurate in making that claim?
She self-identifies as such, yes.
So that means that if I today self-identify as black, then I'm entitled to the protections of the Civil Rights Act, right?
And why would you do that?
Well, why would Rachel Dolezal do it? For money and power?
No, in my opinion, I mean, the woman comes from a biological family of two white parents who adopted 4 black children. We're going to want to get into the psychology of it.
No, but that's why I asked you.
Saw black children. You didn't ask me for the psychology.
Well, no, I'm not asking you for the psychology. I'm asking you, how are you going to define the group?
But if you wanted to identify as black, so if you wanted to say Lars Larson and check the box, and say you're African American on a resume, right?
Yeah, on a job app.
There are a bunch of cases.
On a job app.
There are a bunch of cases on a job application where Jose Rivera never got a job interview, ever, in over 322 job applications.
But now, but I want you to answer my question, because
his name to Jason Rogers.
Angela, you're just going to fill the air with words, and we're not going to actually get anywhere. How are you going to define this group? You know, you're a lawyer, I'm not. You're a lawyer, I'm not. It makes the difference that if you say we're going to protect members of a group, like women, at least up until the last year or two, nobody had any tough time telling the difference between men and women, although now it seems there are 5 or 6 different genders that we can identify. But men and women, and if you said women are a protected class or black Americans are a protected class, somebody could say...
Why would anyone want to be a part of a class that's being discriminated against?
Well, apparently some people do.
Part of that class.
Rachel Dolezal did. And in fact...
Let's get beyond her.
All right.
You're not allowed to...
So how are you going to define the trans...
Why would someone want to pretend to be trans?
Because they have an advantage in getting jobs, and they have political power that comes from that.
You make no sense, my friend.
No, it does make sense. Do you? Let me ask you this, Angela.
Trans people commit suicide at a 47%.
We're not. Now you're changing the subject. Do you think?
I'm not,
Angela. I'm gonna ask you a straight question. No pun intended.
Or a gay one.
Did Rachel, or a gay question? Did Rachel Dolezal gain money and power by pretending to be black?
Nope. She gained a lot of humiliation and...
no, before the humiliation, did she gain money and power by pretending to be black?
I'm not going to use this entire conversation and only her as the example.
Well,
okay, because
there are lots of examples
in the middle of Oklahoma. There are trans people in the middle of Oklahoma that are committing suicide as we speak. Okay?
That's your political message. I'm just trying to get an answer as to how you define the group.
To discuss something so important.
Angela, I'm only
the entire conversation.
Angela, I'm only asking, how are you going to define the protected group?
Whether they identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender.
So it's all in your mind.
The governor of your state, my friend.
Well, by the way, I was going to bring up the governor of the state of Oregon.
Your governor's bisexual, but she has sex with men.
Well, actually, she only has sex with one man.
She's wondering whether or not she's gay or straight. Who gives a crap?
Well, I'll tell you who gives a crap. If she's a heterosexual woman by her behavior...
Ask your governor of your own state.
You know what, Angela? If you won't let me ask the question, we can't conduct an interview.
This isn't really an interview, but go ahead.
Well, If the governor of the state of Oregon...
It's you asking short-sighted...
Okay. You know what? At this point, it doesn't sound like Angela wants to talk. Angela, thank you very much. I very much appreciate the call. Back in just a moment. You're listening to the Lars Larson Show.